of its director, M. Fisher and Cora Ackerson, gallery associates, and Michelle Carlson, our executive director. The Lansing Art Gallery and Education Center, a nonprofit organization, has been a staple in the Lansing community for over 50 years and has been a leader in public art creation in Lansing for over 13 years. ArtPath is in its 6th year. Is one of these public art programs. ArtPath is a result of the hard work of Katrina Daniels, Exhibition and Gallery Sales Director, and Emily Stevens of the City of Lansing Parks and Recreation. We'd like to give a special thanks to our title sponsors, MSU Desk Drawer Funds, as well as all of those who contributed towards the success of ArtPath 2022. Now I'd like to turn over the stage to our artist today, Henry Moonrod.
Woo!
Hey everybody. Hi. Thank you so much for that introduction. It was amazing. Hi, I am Henry Moonrod. I am an artist and sculptor local to the area, and I was part of ArtPath this year, and it was great. Yeah. I loved working on the sculpture. I loved all the people I met and everyone that helped me along the way. Even though we weren't able to be out by the sculpture today, I have a little scale model of it. This is pretty much what it looks like, but sized up 10 times. It's a steel and glass piece with colored gel in between. It stands around 7 feet tall. It's made out of a 4-inch square steel stock, and it's called Human Presence. It was made this past year, and it's my first serious sculpture and piece. Basically, I got really into an art practice about a year ago, and I was really interested in exploring innovative new techniques and mediums. I was really interested in materials and how materials can interact and change context depending on how they're pushed, how they're pulled, how they're experimented with. So I spent the past year, since around February or so, coming up with a new process and technique that sort of drew upon sign making. A lot of sign making companies use these sort of CNC computer controlled vinyl cutters to cut out shapes out of vinyl that they can then apply onto windows, onto gallery walls. It's used everywhere. But I wanted to try and take those practices with the CNC and the computer and sort of weld them to sturdier materials with the steel and with the weight of the metal. So I sort of cut out these colored gels with the computer, applied them in between layers of mirror. I did this process to basically make sections of the mirror transparent using a chemical component that basically ate away at the silver in different areas and made it so you can see through it. And then this process I had to repeat on both mirrors, which was very hard, especially at scale, because these are about 4 foot by 5 foot mirrors, and it's just me in the studio. But I had a lot of help from members of the Lansing Makers Network. Lou over here is actually one of those members, and he helped me tremendously through this process. But basically what I had to do was sandwich these mirrors together, have the vinyl in between them, and then put them all in a metal frame and get it over to ArtPath. So that's all the technical parts. That's how the piece was made. But what the piece is sort of about kind of goes back further to when I was in college. I did this photo series spanning about a week where I used Instagram. I used its grids feature to document litter, trash, garbage, refuse that I found along my walks through the city. And I found a lot of momentum and clarity and uniqueness to these pieces of litter and trash. They started to form these kind of compositions. And so I started noticing more and more like, oh, like that box of cigarettes is pretty interesting, like the way the cigarettes are piling out of it, the way it's been smushed slightly. Oh, that bottle with the glass broken, that's pretty cool. Like there's the way it catches the light, the way it reflects off of pieces. So as I started photographing like Cheetos over here, glass over there, I started to find these, I don't know what to call them, but I guess, environmental compositions. And so it started making me think about litter, about how we, toss off a bottle, we toss off some pieces of trash, and it becomes part of our environment. And like, what is that doing? What does it mean? We have all of these like preconceived notions where it's like a bad thing. It's, seen as garbage, as refuse. But that's also something that we put on it. That's something that we label it instead of just seeing it. And in a way, that labeling of it puts it under our notice, puts it, unconscious. Like if you go and drive to a Strode where, there's McDonald's over here, a gas station, it's by a highway, you expect there to be litter there. You expect there to be trash there. It's like part of that environment. So if you went to one of these and there was no trash, no litter, it would make you sort of remark on it. You'd be like, oh, this is kind of weird. It's like clean here. Why is that? So what I want to try to do is use art, and especially public art, because I've started getting this really deep love from public art through ArtPath. The process of, coming up with an idea, applying for it, refining it, figuring out how to actually make it. Because I didn't know how to weld. I didn't know how to work with glass or vinyl. I didn't know how to make any, I knew how to make this on a laser cutter. I knew how to make an Illustrator file. But through the Lansing Art Gallery, through the Lansing Makers Network, I was given the tools and the opportunity to learn how to make sculptures. And so now I'm just adding more and more momentum to my practice, and I'm trying to refine it a bit more with theory. I've been reading this book, Hyperobjects, by Timothy Morton. He's a new philosopher, very modern. It's got great ideas, at least in this book that I've read. But he describes this idea of a hyperobject, which I feel like the litter human presence really fits into well. There's this idea he's talking about where there's objects beyond a spatial and temporal scale that we can understand, that we can interface with. These are objects so big, ideas like global warming, how much uranium is stockpiled, just the number of rocks on a beach, pebbles, stuff like that, where it's beyond a human scope, where we can count, where we can measure, and so we have to interface it through data. We have to look at it and sort of scrape a face off of it and be like, okay, the global warming is these temperatures going up. Uranium is this parts per million, but it's the skin that goes around the whole Earth that encompasses us, that we're a part of. These objects are so big that we're inside these objects, and we're objects within objects within objects. So to me, litter is part of that. It's this idea that our environment now has all these little pieces of plastic, all these little discarded bits that humans have created, that have shed off of us, and that now form the skin that gets broken down more and more into microplastics, into these little beads that form this film around all of us and influence us. And so with this piece, I'm trying to sort of bring us back into that perspective. I want to continue a series that delves deeper into how we are reflected within our environment, how we change it, how our environment changes us. And let me kind of delve back into this piece in particular for a second. So going back to when I first started designing the concept for this piece, I took a bunch of photos of garbage along the river trail. I basically went everywhere. I took photos out of garbage cans. I took photos along the street of trash, litter, anything along the river trail that was human-made, that could form a kind of composition, just straight top down with my camera. And I took all of those and took pieces from them and sort of traced them in Illustrator. So over here, you can kind of see the idea of a cup. Over here was a bag, and then I sort of abstracted them out into these more general shapes that could be multiple things, depending on who's looking at them, which I feel makes them more relatable instead of very specific to just the river trail, just this one pile of trash, just this one cup. The mirror element was so that it was site-specific and person-viewer-specific. There's no way, and I know because I had to photograph it, there's no way to like interact with this piece where you're not changing it just by your perspective of it. If you're standing in front of it here, you show up in it. So to me, that helped to frame the viewer like into the litter. They're part of this large composition that's made out of trash, and they're also part of the background, their environment right behind them. If we were out on the path right now, that environment would be the river itself, is the main face that you would interact with it. The other side's kind of woods, a fence area. And then the transparency, the sort of stained glass effect was also intentional. I wanted to have these litter forms elevated to a level that we elevate images in churches and around the home, where light pours through it, gives it a glow, a dimension. If I had a little flashlight I could show, but you get the idea. It's really great to come out sunrise and sunset and just look at the piece, because the light hits it just perfectly that each of the shapes shine and glow in their own way. Yeah, I'm trying to think. So that's the theory part, that's specific on the piece. For me, what else is there? Oh, well, I can talk a little bit more about how I made it. So this is actually a section of the pipe here that was welded together. So it's very thick stuff. I basically went to Alro, which is one of the metal suppliers in the area, and I was like, what can I buy here that I could hit with a car and it wouldn't come down? Because I was really worried about it falling and hurting somebody. It's right next to a playground. So he gave me this stuff, and he's like, yeah, you could go out with a baseball bat, with a car, with a whole semi. It's not going to break, hopefully. And then I did some really good welds. I had to learn how to actually carve into this with an angle grinder and do like a seed weld or a root weld, and then build on top of that, and then kind of flush it down. And then also along the process, we debated a bunch of different methods for securing the piece into the ground. We settled on this, which is actually a type of foam that utility companies use for light utility poles now. So you can stick it in, you pour this, it's like a two-part sort of epoxy foam. It sets super strong, and it holds like nothing else. It's solid. If you want, we can pass it around. But, oh yeah, Luke, what's up?
It's a flashlight.
Oh, thanks. Man, super. Yeah. So you get a little bit of an idea, the light going through it. Thanks, Lou. I'm sure you turn off your cool flashlight.
Yeah.
Thank you. But yeah, so I had a ton of help in this piece through the Lansing Makers Network. I basically got their 24/7 pass there, and I was just in the studio, till 3 a.m. multiple days, just working on learning how to weld, learning how to build the piece. It's a very scary piece, and I think in my future public art works, I won't be using, or I'll be using thicker glass or maybe a different type of glass. I've been looking into it. But basically, sheet glass is very hard to protect and transport, especially outside, long distances. There were multiple stages near the end where if I did anything wrong, it would just shatter, or it would break the piece in such a way that I would either be delayed in installing it, or I just wouldn't be able to finish it at all. And it was very nerve-wracking. Like, I had me and my partner, or one of the members at the space, like carefully moving it or putting on a dolly and pushing it super slight. Because one time I actually did drop a whole mirror, and then I had to track down another 4 foot by 5 foot mirror and have it cut just right and do my process of this to get off the silver. But in the end, it all worked out. And it was a wonderful process and wonderful piece to make. I learned so much during it. I really pushed myself as hard as I've pushed myself in anything before, and I love doing it, and I would do it again. I want to apply to more public art programs and get more pieces in and just keep it going. Yeah.
Henry, can you speak
Totally.
to the location when Henry and I met to look at specific sites?
Yeah.
We put so much thought into the environment and how this piece would react with the environment in terms of reflection and location. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Of course, yeah. So that was actually, I think, the first time we met, too, in person,
Yes.
right? Yeah, so I met Katrina at the park, and I had all these different ideas about how I wanted the piece to look, what I wanted going on with the environment, but then also like safety concerns. Like one of the first sites we were looking at, there was a potential for the sun to hit it, and then for that reflection to hit the street. And it was like this one-way, very busy street. So I didn't want that. So I actually had an app on my phone that could show you the position of like the sun, throughout the whole summer. So I was able to basically look at it month by month and be like, all right, this is where our path of the sun is going to be. It's not going to reflect and hit someone's house. We're all good on that aspect. But then, we started off in this one area that I believe was more just kind of flatter. There was more grass, some trees sort of blocking the view. And then we eventually settled on this one space that had the river in it and that had the water. And I really wanted the, the water, and I was glad we were able to move, because just being able to see the water move in it, see the dock, the reflections, and it's also a very popular area, so a lot of times when I've gone to visit, there's people sitting on the dock and they're reflected in the dock, there's people walking by, interacting with it. That was the other thing. How much time do I have? Okay, cool. I have a lot of stories because the install on this actually took about 3 days, nights, thereabouts. And so I was out on the trail with the sculpture, finalizing things, putting pieces in place, really late at night and really early in the morning. And so I met with a lot of the public as I was working on it, and some of the people I had really good, deep discussions with about art, about the piece, while I was installing the piece, so I was a bit stressed about that. But it was wonderful to meet our city that way. Like, I met a ton of great people. There was this one guy, sorry, I can't speak. I thought I was getting catcalled a bunch, because I kept hearing a cat call whistle, and I was like, is someone catcalling me? Because I'm sweaty, I'm in overalls, I'm in a big construction vest with like a, hard hat on with a light on it. I'm like, this is not a look. This is not fashion. But it turns out there was this guy with a parrot or a macaw or something on his shoulder, scootering by at night, and the macaw was doing the like little whistle, the like cat call whistle at me, and I just couldn't see it because it was dark. And then it turns out there's 2 of these guys that live in, I guess, in Old Town and commute back and forth, because there was one guy I ended up talking with him, and then I saw another guy in a different bird that was also cat call whistling me. It was a different whistle, and I was like, what's going on? And then, of course, there was a horde of students one night, because right where my sculpture is a large root that's sort of created a bump. So there's all these drunk students coming from Old Town, hitting that and flying a little bit. And it's got to be like, 30 or 40 of these students. So it's all these scooters at full speed, and then like screams, and then I'm up there and I'll like poke out, and then that scares them. So it just like keeps, just like this long line of scooters and screaming. And then the final day, I have everything in place. I've got this polycarbonate shielding so that, if someone were to go at it, it would bend, not hit the mirror and then bounce back. And I'm putting that in, and the cottonwoods are, I don't know what it's called, spawning. The seeds are coming down from the cottonwoods. There's all these little cotton balls falling from the sky, and it's the worst stuff because the static electricity on the panel and the glass is catching all of these. So there's all this like fuzzy stuff inside of my piece that's about to be sealed forever. It was like a whole thing. But we got through it. We got it done. We got it installed. And yeah, it was incredible. You know, the experience was phenomenal, and I want to try to investigate more ways to do this mirror technique. I have some pieces I'm working on right now back at the space that I am lasering, coating. I'm trying an approach with minimal color, so it would just be sort of the glass and these layers of reflection behind it. So sort of layered glass forms, maybe some wire screens. I want to investigate sort of obscuring reflections and diffusing them and how that changes how people approach the pieces. Yeah. Any questions, comments, anything people want to know about?
When you were talking about the
Yeah.
litter, it was making me think about this idea of kind of, you can look at it as sort of a nuisance, but I think that I'm projecting, but like maybe you're looking at it a little bit of like an artifact.
Yes, yeah. It's tough to talk about because you bring up litter and it immediately has a strong reaction in basically everybody. And I'm not trying to stand up for litter or anything. Like, I think it's awful in its own way, but it's also something really beyond an individual level. Like, you know, it's more of a systemic corporate artifact that is in our lives. You know, often it's this idea that we throw something, even in a trash can, it becomes litter. You know, there's no hole that we can throw something into that disappears forever. You know, the world's flat now, not in that sense, but it's flat in this idea of that, you know, we used to think of, you know, toilets, sinks, drains, trash cans as these portals that we can just put stuff into and it leaves us. And more we find that stuff in our own backyard, so to say. So yeah, when I look at litter, I think I want to pull it up and elevate it and look at, all right, this is a composition, this is a piece that demands attention, so that when people are walking around, they see it, it puts some sort of action, some sort of itch in them that can make them do something else. If that helps, that explains. Cool. Yeah.
You said that this was your first public art sculpture?
Well, it's actually my first sculpture.
First sculpture?
Yeah.
And what other artistic things have you involved?
Well, my background's actually, commercially, I'm a video editor and, you know, cameraman. But I moved from that into photography, especially wet plate photography. And so I did a lot of work on that. Nothing that I'd want to necessarily show because I don't feel like my practice was fully developed yet for that medium. But I loved the physicality of it and this like multi-step technique that everything could kind of change, it could morph, and you get something that's a very organic image. So I did a lot of wet plate images. I'm working on this process that actually combines wet plate photography with powder coating, because I feel like one of the, not issues, but something I'd want to see more of is more color in wet plate. And so I was thinking, well, how could I bring color into it? Well, it's shot on metal. Powder coating can go over metal. So what if I bring this analog and this digital together, bring this wet plate photography, powder coating, and a laser cutter, and kind of, you know, mesh together the past and sort of this future. It's more of a present technology now, it's everywhere, but so that's something I'm interested in.
The jump
Yeah.
to the sculpture.
Yeah, honestly, I don't really know where it happened myself. I was investigating that process with the powder coating, and then I started making scale models of works through the laser cutter, and it was very fast to iterate it and design new shapes and forms. And I think I jumped from the powder coating to, this is actually lasered out. This isn't the mirror etching technique that I developed for the larger scale, because on that larger scale, the etching is clearer, the lines are a lot cleaner, you can do a lot more control with it. It's finicky in its own way, but it's a nicer final product. This has a sort of, you can see the lines, you can see this grid in here, which I don't love, but could be used, I don't know. So I did that, and then I was like, well, what if I did a whole piece around that? I'll just slap on some metal legs, metal frame, whatever. I can just do it out of wood now and do it out of metal later. And I just learned a lot through that.
Really need to
Yeah.
feel the spontaneity of it all and
Well,
the joy out of it. It's cool.
yeah, honestly, a lot of it comes from the space I'm in, like the Lansing Makers Network. What's great about it is you have this laser cutter right here, and then you walk, 10 feet, and you're in the welding station. And so you can go from lasering acrylic and metals and making a full scale model of everything you want, dimensions, plans. And you can take it over and plasma cut it out of steel and weld it all up. So to me, the space enabled that spontaneity that otherwise would have been a slower process. Yeah.
For people who might not know, can you explain what the Lansing Makers Network is?
I would love to explain the Lansing Makers Network. It is a wonderful space that I try to publicize everywhere I go. It is a maker space located off of South Pennsylvania. It is a huge industrial warehouse that is full of areas for crafts, sewing, textiles, fibers, for sort of 3D technology, so 3D printing, vinyl cutting. There's a design lab. There's a metal fabrication shop, so welding, blacksmith forging, metal cutting, plasma cutting. There's a whole CNC table, a wood shop, a machine shop it has a whole series of lathes that you can do for small or big projects, a laser cutting area, rug tufting area, jewelry station that's huge. Trying to remember. Oh, electronics, you can solder, make electronic art. A break room, what else we got? And then there's huge bay doors, so you can bring your sculptures in, bring your sculptures out. And the way it works is they do a checkout process where you just get like safety for yourself, safety for the tool, and then you can just use the tools whenever. And there's different tiers. There's a sort of half hours, and then there's a 24/7. I just swipe my card in, I can go in the space, I can weld, make anything I want, leave whenever I want. It's an incredible space and opportunity for anybody that wants to get their hands working on something. And they have openings and events all the time. Like they have open sew Sundays, open tours. And it's great. It's very affordable too. And there's a free membership pass you can get at the library for 1 month. Free membership if you just want to test it out. Yeah. Any other questions, comments?
I was going to say, Sabrin and I had a tour of the makerspace, and neither of us had ever been there, and it is magical.
It's awesome.
I just wanted to just dive in, and yeah, it's really cool. It's such a cool resource.
Yeah, and
the community has.
if people want to find me afterwards, I can set up a tour for people. We can go there. We can look at the whole space.
It's really fun.
It's awesome. I highly recommend it. Every artist or even person that's interested in just making like a gift or present that I bring through there is like, how is this here? How is this so cheap? It's very cool. Very cool space.
How long has it been around?
It's 10 years, 12?
Yeah, we just celebrated the 10th anniversary.
Yeah.
We started off at Temple Club.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Temple Club.
Rented out the Temple Club, upstairs and downstairs. Then we went to St. Joseph Highway, another warehouse kind of thing. And 2 years ago, I think, or
Yeah, we moved to
around
South
that,
Pennsylvania.
we moved into
Yeah.
into this facility. So
Yeah. It's a great space.
yeah.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Great. I'd like to say thank you to everyone for coming out tonight, and thank you to Henry for letting us get to know you and your art as well. And just to let you all know that our next Art Path talk will be on August 31st, and it will be with Chance Liscombe at Site 18.